The crowd went berserk. A bunch of beer-swilling dykes. We're doing AFLW next year.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, the Noongar Wadandi Mort. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Scratch the surface and everyone has a story. Welcome, Kaya, to the Wisdom of Women.
Our guest today is a football powerhouse, creating the women's AFL as we know it.
Yeah.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
But we're going to start our chat today with the girl who was told she couldn't play football.
Yeah, again, big welcome, Jan Cooper or Coops. Now, you can't tell girls that anymore. They can't play footy.
No, thank goodness. But, back in my day, the only time I got to play football was in the backyard with my brothers and their mates or at family gatherings playing King of the Pack or following my dad around to football. And so it's actually quite ironic because from a very young age we lived in the goldfields and the very first women's league in the whole of Australia was in the goldfields. So there's 4 men's teams up there and each of them put a women's teams on the park in 1921.
So that's insane. That's something that we did not know.
No, and most of Australia don't. And Victoria kind of default to them being the first with a Carlton-Collingwood women's game. But the very first game ever was still in Perth, was in WA. So Foy and Gibson's, who was a retailer at the time, the women decided while the men were off at war that they would keep the AFL going. So the retail side of Foy and Gibson's played the warehouse girls and they were dressed in things like brogues, silk stockings, skirts down to their ankles. And they used to wear caps that kind of looked like shower caps back in the day because that was one of the rules of football back then was you didn't have a person on the mark. Where you marked the ball was marked by throwing your cap on the ground. So I think the men had like Peaky Blinders style caps. And the women had these shower curtains.
Women had to wear shower caps.
Well,
How
you know,
lucky
they were
were
kind
they?
of, yeah,
Nice
they were kind
ladies.
of, well, they were like, I haven't described it very well,
No,
Shauna,
no,
but they were
no.
kind of like puffy things that were sitting on their heads and they'd throw them on the grass and then go back to have their kick. But it gobsmacks me that they even thought they could play sport,
Yeah,
especially a bustling sport, you know.
God, I imagine you can't even kick in skirts like that.
No, but even running, who runs in stockings and brogues, for goodness sake?
Silk stockings.
Yeah, silk stockings, which were very expensive back in the day, but I suppose they got a discount working for Foy and Gibson because they were like a store like Myers. And so 1915 was the very first game, a fundraiser, and the women raised quite a bit of money. And it took off across Australia. So here's another one. In Adelaide, they had a tiger moth plane do a fly over the game that the women were putting on and dropped the game football over Adelaide Oval out of the tiger moth. I mean,
I can see this as an idea for the next grand final.
Well, I said that around. I said in one of the Eagles games. Can we go to the goldfields because Eagles region is the goldfields, and we're doing some fabulous things up there just quietly. And could we not have like an AFLW game up there or a pre-season game and have a you know, plane go over the top and drop the ball, but the risk management is like astronomical. So the answer to that was no.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And even the answer to having an AFLW game up there to mark, because I thought in 2021 that would be 100 years of female football in WA in terms of league. But no, the AFLW wasn't quite ready for that. But I'm not putting that cue in the rack just yet. I still think there could be a possibility of a country AFLW game or pre-season game up there.
Fantastic.
But yeah, so I lived quite a bit of my young life in the goldfields. So it was pretty ironic that I should be there in the 60s following my dad around to his football because he was captain coach of Mines Rovers, and there was I. There was nothing in place for women and girls, and they'd lost all their history by then. So like my dad didn't even know that there was a Mines Rovers women's football team back in the day when he was there as a man.
So as you say, that history just disappeared away and everyone forgot about it.
And it did across the whole of Australia. because a fabulous woman called Brunette Lekic, who is a mum of 2 footballers that play for Claremont currently, in and around 2014, I don't know where she's doing masters or something, but she was starting to delve into the women's football history and found all of these things out. And so she was finding out that there was women's games in Ballarat and this, that and the other thing. And so somebody went up to Kalgoorlie to have a look at those 4 clubs to go, have you got any women's memorabilia?
Yep.
Not one club had anything. And even I then went to Dad and said, look, you've still got a network up there and they're in aged care or whatever. Can you ask them, have they got any idea? No. But one of the other ironic things was one of his best mates who's now passed away, and we called him Uncle Greg Cox, his mum was in the premiership, the first premiership team. He learnt footy from his mum, not his dad. His dad never played football.
Oh, my God.
And there's mum. And I said, Uncle Greg, you know I'm into my football. I'm working in the code. Why didn't you tell me? Oh, I just didn't think it was important. Another one of those I just didn't think it was important moments.
Oh, my goodness.
So luckily his sister had Mum's trophy, which was a beautiful necklace in gold.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, what a brilliant trophy.
Yes.
You know, not a kind of a nufty one that gathers dust on the mantelpiece.
That one
A
was
beautiful
ahead.
necklace. So good work for keeping Mum's original fairest and best trophy.
That's amazing.
That is great history.
That's actually a really good way of having a trophy. I'd get jewelry. I'd
Same,
play
pick
sport
me.
for
Oh,
a
if I was
jewelry.
allowed to play it.
So you didn't play footy?
No.
Ever? You never ever played footy?
I
Except in the
played
backyard?
Well, in the backyard and on family picnics, and I did do kick to kick at you know, because all the kids would go onto the oval back in the day, and I'd play kick to kick. I played a couple of powder puff derbies, which were like 10 minutes worth. I actually thought I was quite good.
With proper footy boots on?
No,
you just had your little joggers.
Yeah. But had a jumper that was way too big, and, you know, all of that. But I thought
Love
I
to
was
see pictures of those.
hot. No pictures.
Oh, no.
No, see, there's no record of this sort of stuff, so it's really disappointing.
But you did play other sport.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and I loved being physically active. So, and I played state level cricket and volleyball, and I played, you know, A grade netball and basketball. I sailboarded, I swam. It was a bit unlucky in swimming. They changed the rules. They used to have times, and if you met a certain time, you get in the state team. And then all of a sudden they decided to change that. And even my time in the previous year would have got me in the state team, but because I came fourth, it didn't get me anywhere. So I was like,
no medal for you.
No.
Right?
So I felt a bit robbed, but anyway.
2 codes.
I moved
2
on.
codes is pretty good for state, you know. Not bad.
But I basically tried lots of things because that's where my friends were. So I wasn't necessarily that passionate about any of the codes, to be perfectly honest, that I played. I just loved being with the people that I was with and, you know, striving to be the best we could be.
So you're reasonably competitive on gauging here when you do get into it.
Yeah, I'm a bit white line feverish.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I used to get a bit frustrated with netters because netball because I'd get penalty passes against me all the time. You know, my theory is if you're both going for the ball, just let us go for the ball.
Yeah, but it's non-contact.
You know? I know, and it's sort of
that. It's netball.
But you look at the current National League. I mean, how good is that? They can buff each other around, no problems. They can go flying across the boundary line, and no penalties there. Just play on. It's like, I would have loved that.
On.
Yeah, I would have loved that style. I think that's really great.
So you would have been an amazing footy player.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that because I've actually got some gimpy stuff in my right leg from birth. I've got a right foot that doesn't have ligaments and 2 bones. The bones didn't separate at birth, so I roll my foot all the time. And so after weight bearing on it for quite a few hours or whatever, I'm dogged. I'm in so much pain. So and I can't kick the ball very well because of it, because you need a good strong ankle to hold your support leg, and then the other one needs to be able to point the toe. well, my preferred foot is right. That's the gimpy foot. So my foot flexes all the time. I can't point it. So if I wanted that to be my support leg, then I have to change my...
So
it's too
either way,
long-winded,
really
useless. I would have been a great handballer.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, handballer said, come on, girls, run past me.
Yeah. Bring it to me though.
Yeah,
first.
or 15-metre kicking
Yeah.
on my non-preferred side.
You'd be fine. Yeah.
Or tackling. Yeah, I would have turned the ball over a lot, I think, for our team.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome cover for women's football.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially in Victoria. And the other thing it did too, which was always another strategy, was to get the key decision makers to get to women's games so they could see the athleticism and the passion and understand and even bring them into the change rooms at the end before the girls were, showering and stuff, to actually meet some of them. So the CEO at the time, Andrew Demetrio, was in a function, but he was looking out, thank goodness, and he was gobsmacked about what he saw. And that was the first time he really took and paid attention to what was going on. And I remember at the time too, I said to Sam, how many people do you reckon are in the G at the moment? Because, the G's huge. Yeah. And she went, I actually think there's about 15,000 people in here. I went, really? Because, we gave it a bit of marketing and stuff, or the AFL gave it a bit of marketing to try and get them there, which is pretty incredible when you think it's like green versus gold.
Yeah.
But we marketed it as it should have been, as this is the All-Australian squad from the Women's Nationals, and from this game we're going to pick the All-Australian. They'll be given their medals out on the G before the men's game, Melbourne versus Collingwood. So there was a fair swag of people in there. And I remember down the guts, Kiara Bowes, who is an AFLW competition fairest and best, and Chelsea Randall, who isn't, but probably would be if she wasn't so courageous and threw her body around so much. Chelsea was running out of the midfield, bouncing the ball. Bowers was nowhere to be seen, and all of a sudden she's virtually done a dive and just grabbed Chelsea by the Guernsey and pulled her down, and the crowd went berserk, because it was mid-air, slow motion. It's like,
this great specky play.
Yeah, and the crowd went absolutely radio rental. And from that point on, they were more involved in the game, because I think for them it was a light bulb moment. Like, when did we last see a male game with that much determination? And these are girls who... green, gold, truly it kind of means nothing, but it did, because they were playing on the MCG, a game that they absolutely adored, and given an opportunity in front of 15,000 people, bring it on.
Amazing.
I'm just trying to imagine in my own mind how you would feel as a female stepping out like that to play.
Yeah, well, I bawled a fair bit through it, and I'm going, don't be shocked. This is the norm. Yes, these are the best 46 in the country currently, but this could be the norm. This could be week after week. Yeah. And a lot of those girls ended up being able to play in AFLW. They hung in there long enough to see the first season, because this was 2010 or 11. And so the first exhibition games were then 2013 onwards, and then the first AFLW was 2017. So that's a fair swag in an athlete's life, but they hung in there. And so now a whole lot of them too, like a Natalie Woods played in that game, and now she's head coach. Yeah, right. So they not only hung in there. So see, all you naysayers that thought, well, they're going to become mothers and they'll leave the code and blah, blah, well, they haven't. Yep, and they're now head coaching, and they're,
What was some of the misinformation? And I mean, there must have been some pretty brutal commentary coming from men who were just dead set against women pulling on the boots.
Well, there was so much of it. There was, absolutely disparaging things like, why should we inject funding into the women's state team when they're a bunch of beer-swilling dykes?
Yeah. So how was it when the competition really launched off in those early days as well? Because, there's a lot of talk around audiences when you're talking about the game being played on TV. There's a lot to it, isn't there? There's a lot of politics behind it, sponsorship and so forth.
Well, part of the rhetoric at the beginning around a national televised comp, because we didn't want to compromise on televised. We said if it's not televised, girls still can't be what they can't see. Yeah. So no, it has to be televised. And if you can't do television rights to include AFLW, there's not much point putting it on the park. because the girls aren't idiots. They know that they're, not out there. It's not enough just to have regular games and no TV.
No, it's still a discrimination to an extent.
Correct,
isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely. So that was an absolute given. But and the television viewership has increased every year. But I was at a luncheon the other day, and Gillan McLaughlin was the keynote speaker, and someone asked him that question about, well, it's a bit of a financial impost on the industry. It's not making any money yet, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, it's not. But that's actually not the point, because eventually it will. But you need to give it time. But what's actually happened is it's brought more people to AFL. So since the instigation of AFLW, he had statistics to show that the viewership at AFL level has increased,
Wow.
both live and television.
Yep.
Memberships have increased. Well, that's possibly because you top the AFLW on top of the AFL. And AFLW memberships at AFL level, at AFL clubs, aren't huge yet, but, they will be.
Days.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of our research of we didn't have a business model. So we went to national leagues around the world, and there was only one that was not even making money then, it does now, was the WNBA. And at that stage, it was breaking even.
Really?
So we had to say to them, you need to be brave. You need to actually realise that it's not going to make money. The best we can hope for is breaking even, and that's possibly not going to happen, because there was US women's soccer. Their national league wasn't making money, and yet they were world champions in the World Cup.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and they've got a 300 million population. So just be a bit brave.
Yeah.
We're brave every day. We talk to you about women and girls pathways, so just sparked the bullet, and Gil did. Like, bless him. He, I didn't even know he was announcing this. So there am I, head of female football development around Australia, and my mate Sam Lane's at a media conference because there was going to be breaking news, and Gil goes, so we're doing AFLW next year.
Oh.
And he didn't even tell me. It's like, you're my boss, and you didn't even tell me. So she rings me and goes, Coops, did you know? And I went, no. What's the announcement? And she goes, AFLW starting next May. I went, what? Are you kidding me? Gillan, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes later I went, no, he's being brave. Let's go for it. No, we're not ready, but we'll get there.
Yeah, you'll get
and we
there.
did. We bumbled a bit at the beginning, but no one knows.
Hello. How you do things.
It's just
I
such
love
a great
that.
yarn, isn't it? The way it's all unfolded.
It's organic that way. It was like, come on then, let's do it. Okay.
Yeah. And we had a bunch of girls who probably were ready to leave the code, really fine athletes. But what it did instead was it attracted all these cross-coders who'd wanted to play the game before, but now we had it nationally. They went, yeah, well, we're not going from national basketball to second-tier women's. We're footy.
Yeah.
But we will go from national basketball to a national AFL, or, we will go from soccer or whatever else they came from. And then, of course, the Irish. We've got nearly a whole team of Irish that are contracted
welcome
too.
the Irish.
Yeah.
From the Gaelic.
Yeah.
Football. Yeah.
Yeah. And they transitioned beautifully. So, yeah.
So the first premiership, a sellout.
Yeah. That was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Not expected, I'm gathering by how you're responding. You didn't think?
Well, I was hopeful, but I've got to say your self-belief gets a bit smashed a little bit when the major voice is not going to work, they wanted to put the first game of AFLW on Collingwood's training oval at Amy. And I don't know if you've seen it. It doesn't have a grandstand.
Oh.
It didn't have a scoreboard. No, I'm not kidding you.
There's a scoreboard.
It's like we did, and I said, look, in good faith leading into it, I'll do the 18s nationals there one day because we're doing the nationals back in Melbourne this year. And I said, I'll do the 18s nationals there one day and we'll work it out and see. And I said, it's substandard. You cannot have a national league at a training ground that doesn't have an oval that at best would fit 4,000 people. Oh. And they went, yeah, but that's all that'll rock up, won't it? And I went, no, you're not reading the tea leaves correctly. Victoria itself will send every waking soul that ever has played football to watch this. Yeah. So all the women that this has gone past them, all the young girls who have been watching, us develop this pathway, they'll all be there. But
Yeah.
the other thing was all the men wanted to be there too, to support their daughters, partners, sisters,
Yep.
whatever else. So I'm
Families.
sitting out because I'm not very good at functions. It's not my favourite part of football. I like to be out in the audience, hearing the humour and the comments and everything. So I'm standing out there with my boss at the time, Josh Vanderloo, that we convinced them to shift it. And they went, well, I thought MCG was appropriate. They went icon. Okay, we'll do icon because that's got grandstands. I can cope with that. And we virtually, they'd opened up one side, which was behind us. So that was Chockers with maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people in it. And then they started opening up the other side. And it was like a Mexican wave of people just coming in.
Oh.
Like that. I just remember going, Josh, how many does this stadium hold? And he said 25,000. And I went, we're going to get more than that. And Gil kind of got a bit, because there was nearly 3,000 people outside the gate and we had to shut the gates.
Oh my God.
There was no big screens for them to watch it from.
Oh no.
And he felt, I've let the troops down. So he went out to the crowd outside and went, I'm so sorry. We absolutely misread this big time and I'm so sorry. We cannot let you in. This is now a health and safety issue. All I can say is go home or nick off to a bar and watch it on TV, you know, like
Wow.
at least he was, you know, honest about the whole thing.
Yeah,
so
that's stepping up to it, isn't it?
And then,
big
you know,
stats for who was watching it on television as well.
Huge. And then one of the grand finals, I'm thinking it was, I think I was actually the Cup ambassador, so maybe 2018. Adelaide played Carlton in the grand final at Adelaide Oval because at this point we're still, whoever finishes on top gets the grand final. And Adelaide Oval did us proud too because, again, they opened up everything on one side and people just kept pouring in. So they had no catering on one side, no toilet rolls in the dunnies because they just weren't expecting anybody, no extra trains and public transport running. And I'm sitting with Samantha Mostyn, who was the first female AFL commissioner, and I'm going, Sam, this is going to be a sellout. And it did, same thing. They just kept coming into the stands, 53,000, the third largest crowd ever of anything at Adelaide Oval.
No way.
Of anything. So we're talking Test cricket, AFL games, third largest crowd ever.
Brilliant.
And so that we were sitting there in tears going, oh my God, we were just expecting this. And then we were in tears again because Erin Phillips did an ACL and I was in tears because the cart man, because when you do an ACL or any serious injury, you get, there's a little golf cart with a stretcher on it.
Yep.
So he drove on to get her and then he did something I've never seen. He broke the rules actually. You're meant to take the cart to the nearest part of off the oval and then drive around to the change rooms. He drove straight down the middle and every girl, didn't matter whether they were Carlton or Adelaide Crows, came over to tap her or wish her well.
Oh my
Like,
God.
oh my God, man! Who taught you this empathy to do this?
Yeah.
Like,
That's beautiful.
that's a man.
Yeah.
The cart driver went, this is an historic moment here. This is not good. It's in the middle of a grand final. Erin's the fairest and best of the league.
Here I'm coming through.
I'm going through. I'm going to...
And then to have all the other players, though, acknowledge that moment as
And
well.
a standing ovation from the crowd till he took her finally down the race. It's like, oh my God, my cup is full.
Love to talk to her about what that must have. She must have had so much going through her mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Injury, but then to have all that aspect as well.
Yeah.
Big moments.
Yeah. Well, if we manage to get an AFLW pre-season game down here, which we're trying to work through the machinations, if we get Port Adelaide, we should let you know so you girls could have a crack at interviewing Erin about her
that
journey.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So why do people continue to underestimate women and what you can do and what...
Yeah, why?
Come on.
I know.
So how long did it take for all the clubs to have a female team?
Okay, so there was, I think Geelong was kind of a bit weird. They came on in the second year on their own. So that would have made 7, and then there was, I think there was 3 the next year.
So
Yeah,
you had 6 to start,
6 to
7 the
start.
second.
Then Geelong came the second year. Then 3 the next after that,
Right,
because we were
10.
2019.
Yeah.
Then the last 2. No, what are we up to? My maths is useless.
Yeah,
There was
5 years from.
So the last 2 to join were Port and Sydney Swans, and they were season 6. They were brought on, so
Yeah,
they
okay.
played season 7.
Yeah.
But season 6 and 7 were in the same calendar year. So
Yeah, all right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So not very
So
long.
that's not bad at all, is it?
No, not really.
Yeah.
No, and that was only off the back of how successful the TV viewership and the live audiences were.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So where do you see it going from here? Clearly bigger and better. What are you
Well,
thinking?
the skill level will keep going up.
Yeah.
You know, it's gone up every year. It's astonishing what the girls can come up with. And it's also quite astonishing. You need to know the girls do a 12-week pre-season for a 10-week plus
Yeah.
finals season. The men do a 14-week pre-season for a 24-week plus finals season or whatever it is. So the women are just about doing the same pre-season as the men for half the result. So eventually, and I can't put a time frame on it, but eventually they will be full-time athletes. The coaching staff and the medical staff will all be full-time, because at the moment most of them are part-time.
Right.
So
And let's talk about money. Men get paid a lot of money in some of the footy teams, don't they?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
the women? How do they stack up when it comes to?
Well,
monetary
they're on a
value?
very, very strict sort of collective bargaining agreement at the moment, and they are all tiered. So there's 4 tiers in place at the moment. So financially, no, they're light years away from the men, but the AFL does have an appetite to close that gap. But I think you have to close it gently. Like there's a group of thought that, no, do it straight away and get on with it. But I don't think that's fair on the women. And some women would say, no, do it gently. You know, our captain, for example, Emma Swanson, is a fiery, and she's a very good fiery from what I can gather. So she's building this off-grass career. If you said to her, go full-time football, she's now having to put her off-grass career into a slamming halt. And who knows what the fire department might think if she has another 3 or 4 years full-time in football.
Right.
How's that going to affect her going back to be in the fire department, for example? And there's other women the same. You know, we've got lawyers running around and school teachers and all carpenters, apprentices, all like there's diversity of career off the grass. Now, if they were to come to a screaming halt and be full-time, they haven't had a chance to kind of segue away from their career or build their capacity to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can go straight away. There's a bit more that has to be worked through.
And as
also,
you say, development of the season
Yeah.
as well, so it's a bit more reflective of what the AFL itself.
Yeah, and because I'm sort of evidence-based in a lot of my views, there's no research to show, this is another one of us, we've been talking recently around what's the optimal season for a woman playing football. And like, because there's many tiers of it, like, so AFLW, they get all the expertise they need to support them both in getting ready and if they are injured, the rehab and the prehab and everything. But a second tier woman doesn't. So if she's aspiring to be there, she doesn't get the same necessarily quality of coaching and medical support. And then the tier below that's even worse. And so it drops off. And yet we are drafting women from Perth Football League, which is amateurs. We're drafting women from the Southwest Football League, which is amateurs.
Yeah.
So, you know, until we've got them more on the talent pathway and they have been on the women and girls pathway and played a lot more footy and got their bodies used to it, and we understand what's optimal for a woman's body in our code. Is it 24 games or is it 18 games or, you know, until we've got that kind of data, we're throwing darts at the moment, and that too is not fair on the women.
Is there an acknowledgement then that the physical build of a woman and her capacity is less than what a male biologically in the sense of muscle strength.
Well, if you're
those
putting
other
them up
things.
against a male, yes, but within the code, it's getting them used to the endurance of the game,
Yeah.
the getting 4 bodies falling on top of you when you've lost your footing, when you're trying to change direction, when you're trying to do the Dustin Martin don't argue and you're being held by the arm and you're trying to run away and it's like, oop, that's not working for me. You know, all of that sort of stuff. There's in women and girls sport around the world, there's just not the same amount of research.
No.
So we're chasing all the time to try and get that evidence so that we aren't putting our women at risk. The AFL's doing research at the moment on concussion and ACL because just being a woman, it doesn't matter what you play. Like a woman did an ACL when I was in a yoga class a few years back.
Oh.
Like, truly?
There we go.
I was so
Yoga's
disappointed.
off my list.
I was
That's
so
it.
upset for her. But as I was told, well, we're at risk. Any physical activity, because of our hip to knee, our Q ratio, because our knees aren't necessarily below our hips, whereas men's generally are. So we're at risk in any physical,
That's interesting.
with any weight-bearing physical activity, we're more at risk than men. With concussion, we're more at risk because our neck muscles haven't really been built up.
Yeah.
And our shoulders haven't been built up for sport because, again, we haven't gone through pre-seasons in our codes, you know.
Yeah.
I remember in volleyball, I thought it was hilarious once I sort of got to know about physiology and biomechanics and stuff a bit more. But I remember one of my coaches, one of the state coaches said, right, you girls, in your day job, I want you wearing these weights around your ankles. And so that was great to build up our legs for leaping high and, you know, doing blocks and spikes over the net. But meanwhile, the major part that was doing all the hitting of the ball and the setting and the bumping was getting diddly squat. Except, you know, push-ups on your fingers, which now I haven't got any wrist stabilisers because of that. Thanks very much.
That ain't happening
But
now.
no, but you know what I mean? So it was all, there was no science involved. And I'm not having a crack at my coaches because they were brilliant people and so kind that they were volunteering their time to coach us. But there was no sports science involved.
They were working with what they knew.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the best for having an athletic, balanced body for the code that you're playing, preparing you for the code that you're playing.
Preparation.
Yeah.
Building those bodies up.
So we're still doing that with women because you can't do a strength and conditioning program for the men and go, oh, we'll do that for the women. But that's what was sort of happening at the beginning. So,
I've come so far. What's it like now, sitting on the lounge, turning the telly on, watching an
You
AFLW comp? Like, you know, what's it like for you?
Oh, I still, you know, sometimes I just get goosebumps with what they're doing and how they, and other people talking about it. Like even my husband, you know, like he knows how passionate I am about football, and he joins in he instigates conversation about AFLW now, which he didn't do at the beginning, because I think, you know, he's Jen. He was just sort of not sure about this, even though he never had daughters or anything. But he instigates conversations about. He knows Chelsea Randall. He doesn't even barrack for the Crows, but he knows Chelsea Randall because he has to sit through, you know, watching all the AFLW games, whether I've recorded them or watching them live. He sits through them now, and he loves it. He's as much an advocate and a fan as, you know, the most passionate person. So I get as much thrill listening to him tell his mates, and especially the naysayers of his mates. And he goes, I don't know why you would think that. They're just fine athletes. And you need to get over comparing their skill set to the men's skill set, because we're talking about professional athletes versus semi-professional athletes. And I'd defy you to say they are having more joy with their football than a lot of what I see or sense in AFL. Yeah. They don't act entitled. There's a small proportion, you get that everywhere, but they are grateful still. They embrace it still, you know, like, so
happy to be at the table and having a go.
Correct.
Yeah.
Can I ask what your dad thinks of it? Is he really into it?
Oh,
too?
he's
He
avid.
loves it.
Right from the get-go, because I think he understood that I would have had a crack at it if I'd been allowed to. And also because he's quite well known around his club, I took him to some women's games, and the Swan District's women, when they started up, would get Dad to the jumper presentations and things like that. So I know.
cool.
So they'd invite him.
Yeah.
So they know who Coops is.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he was the original Coops, but come on. So,
Yeah.
So you know, yes.
And I was reading about your competition. Right. So you've both got your
It's not that serious.
Order
But
of Australia medals.
yes.
And
yes.
he's got a grandstand, you're after grandstand, but you've got a full cup.
Yes,
And
I've
he's
got
only
a full
got half
cup.
a cup.
Yes, he shares two things with John Todd, half a grandstand and half a cup
Oh, well.
in Dean Mill.
Yeah. Oh, in Dean Mill.
And the Dean Mill, well,
Oh, I've been to the Dean Mill Footy Club. I used to live in
Yes.
Manchmup, so I used
Yes.
to ride out there to watch the footy. when I was
yes,
11.
that's right.
Do you have to get out there and help even up the tally?
Well, I said to Trevor Nisbet one day, look, Nizzy, any chance you could give me, a grandstand here would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
really good for
Yeah.
my
Like mine.
cause.
Yeah.
And he pointed to the limestone terrace that's on one side of MRP. And he said, what about that one? I said, I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's in the shade. It's near the entrance gate. No problemo. Just
So unofficially, that's yours.
Well, it's
So
just between Trevor and
Yeah.
I. Yeah.
so you're getting
Unofficially.
there. That is
Oh,
excellent.
love it.
No, it's
Love
not a
it.
serious comp, but yeah.
It's really that's amazing. It must, like you always say, there's so many other people that have advocated as well, but and they should get it, but they'll get theirs when they deserve it, and you've got yours, and you've worked so
Yeah.
hard.
Well, like this Sunday at our home game, it's v Melbourne, and I'm taking Hall of Famer Charmaine Rogers, who was one of those women that helped set up the Women's League in
Yeah.
WA, who had the guts to do that and has been working across both genders, coached a son, coached a daughter, coached Claremont women. Like, she's done everything, and deservedly so. She's a life member of Claremont, Innaloo Piranhas, and now the WA Footy Commission.
That's amazing.
So, and she's a devout eagle. And so I said, Charmy, you need to come with me. And so that's basically who that's the kind of person I'm going to be taking to lunch with me. Not my husband. But people who I think deserve that opportunity as a way of thanking them for what they've contributed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And it also, because our chair, Paul Fitzpatrick, will introduce them, he'll be able to give the other people in the room a bit of an education about what she's done for women and girls football over the years. So to me, it's as much about introducing them to a crowd that don't know and giving them an understanding.
I imagine there's a lot of unrecognised players, so
Oh,
to speak,
yeah.
behind this whole scenario, isn't there?
Yeah, administrators, volunteers of all kinds. Yeah. It's not until you start digging that you find who has contributed and has asked for no acknowledgement, no recognition. They just do it because they love the code, you naysayers.
Yeah,
you
love
know.
the code. When you look back now, is there anything that you might have changed or done differently?
Yes, that's a very good question though, Shauna. And I have been asked this before. I think to fast track more buy-in from my AFL colleagues, I think I would have lived in Melbourne for maybe 2 or 3 years, because it's a little bit like that. You can't be what you can't see, out of sight, out of mind. And so I could only really badger them when I was in their space. I didn't get as much traction just ringing them up, emailing them, whatever. It was only when I was in the office that I could kind of hold them accountable for things that they were meant to be doing, or I felt they needed to be doing, or was on the strategic plan. So I kind of think if I was in there on a daily basis, not so much even my immediate counterparts, the other national managers, they sort of got it pretty quickly. But it was, like an Andrew Demetrio who had the purse strings. Well, I never got to see him once. Even though when I was over there, tried to get meetings with him, and I had times and days and he would cancel because, that was like small fry stuff compared to what he was trying to achieve. So I think, and I am quite brash now. I don't really care. If your door's open, that means, well, I'll talk to your EA and I'll go in.
Yeah, okay.
Like how hard can it be to say no
I'm
to
coming
me?
in.
Yeah.
So it was no problem when I was live over there. But I think in hindsight, if I'd been there for maybe the first 2 or 3 years, I would have got faster traction
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just to immerse yourself in the real centre.
Yeah,
Of-
and had louder messengers when I weren't there, to actually fly the flag. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Do you have role models? Do you have mentors? Did you have people that you look to as you were moving through all this process to think, I like the way you play, I'm going to take that on board?
Well, Brian Cook I always admired, and that's why when I was starting to find that, and I'm a little bit, I suppose I was a little bit impatient. I just thought things would happen just because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And, I very quickly found that wasn't the case. And so I remember being interviewed for a job, not even in football, and I didn't even necessarily want the job, but it was my boss at the time said, we need you up here. You're capable of being up there. And I went, imposter syndrome. I didn't think I was ready. And I was a bit half-hearted about it. And Brian Cook was on the panel, and I was pathetic, absolutely pathetic. And it was almost like I sabotaged myself because I wanted to, because I was kind of, for want of a better word, packing my dacks about what if I did get this job? How a lot of women do behave if asked to be in a more senior role or trying to get a more senior role. And anyway, so Brian Cook was on the panel, and bless him, he rang up afterwards and said, I need to take you out to lunch and tell you some things. And he said, you shot yourself in the foot so many times. You shouldn't have said this and you shouldn't have said that. And I know what you're capable of because I've been observing you. You would have got that in the blink of an eye. And he gave me some tips, and I was very appreciative. And he said, why would you doubt yourself? And I thought, oh my God, I didn't realise that you could observe that I had that skill set or talent or whatever, or potential. So when I was starting to find things a bit grim, I rang him and said, I need a bit of help here. Any chance? And he went, love to. And at the time he was CEO of Geelong. And when I was in Melbourne, I'd catch the train down there because you could do a bit of work, and it was $11 only. And he'd pick me up from the train station, even though the station's only 200 metres from his office. And I'd say, Cookie, I can walk. It's fine. And he'd go, no, because my library's on the back seat of the car. And he had hardcover books and things that were guiding him. So he wanted to share that knowledge with me. So I'd go, pick a book. So I'd pick a book, and then I'd mail it back to him when I'd finished. But whatever the content of the book was would form the conversations in the future. And he was just so helpful and fantastic. And so seeing how he went about being a CEO, I actually thought I could be a CEO. Yeah. But then I never applied for any jobs or anything. But,
still a chance,
but he was a brilliant mentor. And then my other mentor was the first female AFL commissioner, who's like 15, 16 years my junior, Samantha Mostyn. And I didn't even know she was an AFL commissioner. And so this is how things unfolded. Like, I'm working for the AFL and nobody thinks to tell me that we have a female commissioner. So I don't know, like my husband was away on a footy trip or something, so I'm home alone, and I got home from a meeting and I thought, I just don't feel like going to bed yet. I'm just going to surf. And Q&A came on the ABC, and she was the first person, and she was talking about environmental issues, and I thought, oh my God, that woman is so intelligent and so articulate, and I love what she had to say. And then, so I watched the rest of the show, and at the end they went, and thank you, Samantha Mostyn, AFL Football Commissioner. And I just went, what? Here we go again, people not telling me stuff. So I rang up the AFL the next day, one of my colleagues, and said, Samantha Mostyn, can I have a contact details, please? And why didn't you tell me? Oh, I didn't think it was important. Oh, duh. Anyway, so I got in touch with her. She responded straight away. We connected up, and she became one of the biggest messengers you could have because she was with the decision-making body of the code. Yeah. So I could feed her stuff by phone, email, send a PowerPoint, send a strat plan, send a progress, send her what we needed, what the gaps were. Could you advocate for this, whatever? Right. And she would do things like when we had exhibition games, she'd go, right, I'll bring Mike Fitzpatrick, the then chair, down. Yeah, okay. Thank you, could you? Because he won't come down on his own, but if you escort him, he can't escape. Yeah. Just hold him in there. Or whatever else needed to be done. Yeah. But I don't think she even realised she was mentoring me. I think it was me informally going, well, I'm going to... The other thing I liked about her was I have a personality trait that kind of judges out loud sometimes. It's not good. It's not good.
We call that the foot and mouth disease.
Yeah,
do we?
yeah, bad, very poor. Sometimes I get a bit too excited and I just don't stop myself. Sam doesn't do that. She's very conscious about not judging people. She gets her evidence and she collaborates with people and she does things that I would like to be able to do, so that I learnt a lot about if you're trying to read the tea leaves, Jan, like shut the F up sometimes and just let things unfold, let people become a more active listener rather than trying to barrel in with your message all the time, and let it evolve and see where it takes you, because you might actually go, actually they're doing some good things. What can we do to piggyback on that rather than go, yes, but you need to do this.
Yeah.
So that's sort of some of the stuff she taught me without really, it was more me observing her in action rather than her necessarily sitting down and going, lesson number 1.
Yeah. How
Whatever.
good to have people like that, though, that, as you say, you can really pick all those bits that are going to be helpful.
And then there's young people. Because I come from a teaching background, I have learnt so much from young people, besides good playlists on my music. I actually think we undervalue our young people because they don't have necessarily all the constraints of stereotypes and unconscious bias and stuff. They don't seem to have that. They say things how it is. They have different mindsets. They look at life through a different lens. And so I collaborated a lot with the players to get their perspective on things and what would suit them. And in a way, that to me was mentoring me, So not just evidence gathering, but, Daisy Pearce, that's a great idea. Chelsea Randall, thank you for sharing that with me. Or, and a lot of them taught me so much. I can't even think of specifics really, but.
No, that's but you're right. We do tend in a way to dismiss the younger, the younger generation.
Yeah, we think it's like wisdom of the elders, but there's some things we're wise about, but no, not.
And as you say, though, in many ways, the younger ones are getting it much more right than we ever did with our generation because they don't have all those, like you say, preconditioned values or ideals.
I kind of think my nephew's a bit of a gypsy. He goes to RMIT to do his master's in sport engineering.
Wow.
And he's watching an exhibition game because everybody's indoctrinated in my family. There's no escaping watching women's football. So Jordan's in Melbourne. I'm actually at the game and he's watching it with his mates, which in itself gives me goosebumps because Jordan is a man's man and here he is with his housemates watching a women's exhibition game, loving it, going, so Auntie Coops, the football, what size is it? And I went, I don't know, Jordan, how was it developed? Good question. I'll ask Sharon. Leave it with me. Sharon went, we just went, with the men's football. Burley went, we just did it from the men's football. I went, Jordan, it's not based on any science whatsoever. He goes, that's my thesis. Come on.
Excellent.
So he got the top 4 based women's team in VFLW at the time. He went through all their hands, power of leg, all the anthropometrics that you need, different prototypes. RMIT managed to get some sponsorship for him and his mate to do it because they had to build prototypes that the girls could train with. And they went from 5, which is the men's ball, to 4, which was they thought would be the women's ball, to 3.8. Weight, pointed ends, dimensions, all built now on a bit of science, and that's what the women play.
That is amazing. I'm so proud.
Oh, no, I am. And Jordan and Ridge got no credit for it at all.
No way.
Sharon just went, we did this. And Burley went, we did this. And it's like, damn you all.
God.
Yeah.
But I know the true story.
Well, now we know the truth.
Correct.
True, and
That's
other
amazing.
people will.
I know.
Good on him.
So good on you, Jordan.
Yeah.
Well done, Jordan.
Jordan Marshall, actually.
Good on you, Jordan Marshall.
we won't give your address out. Just so
But now you know, girls.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. So what's this thing about the state? You don't want kids to have to go to Perth to train for the state when it's AFL, and what's going on with that? You're trying to get it down in the regional areas a bit more heavily
Continual
supported.
battle over regional
Well, it's
facilities.
all here. It's all here for them.
Yeah.
You know, they've got the expertise. They just need to have faith that Perth will come to them if they need to, and that parents don't need to spend an inordinate amount of money going up there to be seen.
Yeah.
You know, like there's SWAS down here, there's academies, there's the Eagles are now eyes on in terms of football too.
Excellent.
And from what I gathered yesterday from Bernice, netball are leaving it up to SWAS to build their next gen of talented players from the southwest. Like you don't need. There's at least 11 girls that I'm aware of who should be playing youth girls down here or women's league, but they're going up to Perth twice a week. It's no good. And again, you know, harping on about the research, what research is available shows that if kids aren't playing with their mates, if they're travelling long distances to pursue the code, they actually are more likely to drop out of any physical activity, not just the code they're trying to play in.
Oh, that's
So there's your community, your next gen of community volunteers gone, and the health of the community is at risk. So please stay in the southwest and have faith that it's all here.
Yeah.
We love quotes, and we change quotes often, but we'd love to know, do you have a quote relevant today?
Well, no, not per se. Like I can't go blah 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 by Nelson Mandela or whatever, but I guess it's just more a message to people is that bravery is not just about being physically brave. You know, like to my mind, a bungee jumper is not brave. They're just dead set stupid for wanting their eyeballs to fall out of their head and their ankle to rip off their leg.
Agreed.
But I think a marathon runner is kind of brave because I wouldn't want to run for all those hours. But it's just being brave. You know, like I've learnt over the years that what's the absolute worst thing that can happen if you don't go prepared into an interview for a job that you might not even aspire to, but would actually be a passionate thing for you, getting out of bed every day. And so I think bravery comes in many forms, and I would just suggest to be braver. You know, like, and I don't think women are brave enough sometimes. I think that's one of the barriers to a lot of what we do is ourselves.
That
So-
self-sabotage
Yeah,
is a big
so
thing.
be
isn't it?
brave.
There you go. Wise words. Wise word from Coops. Be brave. Love it.
Yes, and thank you for coming on. If you have been affected by any of the topics, then visit the support links below, and we also have links for more show information and to subscribe.
And always remember,
Every day.
You are remarkable.